I got my hands on the new Natasha Denona Hyper Natural Face Palette, and in this video I'm going to give you my first impressions of the palette. I'm going to swatch out the entire palette. I also compare this palette to I Need a Nude and the Glam palette, and then of course I put everything to the test on my face and created this entire makeup look. If you do decide to check out this palette on Natasha's site, I do have a code. It's just ANGELABRIGHT to save you some money. I will leave some timestamps down below if you want to jump around the video, but let's go ahead and dive into this palette. So I did receive this palette in PR. I did look at it, but I have not swatched it yet, so we're gonna go through everything together. This is the PR box that it came in. Very nice and simple. Up here I have a little card insert that kind of describes everything that's in this palette, and then of course the palette itself. First of all, the size of this palette is pretty small actually. I wanted to compare it to my iPhone. I honestly don't know what number iPhone this is, but it's about the same size just for reference. So in this palette we have a bronze and contour trio and then a blush duo, and both of these are a new high-tech creamy powder formula that gives a natural matte finish. And then we have the new Hyper Silk formulas, which is a new formula from Natasha. These are a new talc-free formula with a luxurious silky gel powder texture, and she does say that the best way to apply these are with your fingers. Looking at the shade descriptions, just this one shade Dreamy is her sparkling wet effect shadow, but the rest of them are the Hyper Silk formula. I am so excited to swatch out all of these colors, so let's get right to it. I just have to start with the eyeshadows because I am so intrigued by this new formula. Start with the shade Everyday. Ooh, this feels really smooth. All right, swatch this out. And Everyday is a Hyper Silk light medium brown. Next is Dreamy. And this one is a sparkling wet effect nude champagne. I love this kind of color for all over the lid. And I do really enjoy this sparkling wet effect formula from her, especially in the I Need a Nude palette. Next is Statement. So I know that she named these kind of based off of the look that you can get with each shadow. So this would be like a statement eyeshadow. Yeah, these feel really creamy and are gliding right on my arm. So Statement is a Hyper Silk medium dark brown. Next is Soft. So Soft is a Hyper Silk Rosy Vintage Peach. It's honestly not a shade of shadow that I tend to wear a lot. I don't really wear pink eyeshadows. I think it's interesting to put a pink shadow in this palette when it's meant to be like an everyday kind of basic go-to palette. Like, I just don't know many people that wear this shade of pink shadow on a daily basis, so it's a little bit different. And then the last shade is Casual. Okay, and Casual is a Hyper Silk Satin Taupe. Those are all 5 of the eyeshadows swatched out. I'm very excited to put these on my eyes. They felt really smooth in the swatch, but of course it matters how they apply and wear on the eyes. Let's move on to the bronze and contour. So we have a light, medium, and dark. I'm gonna swatch these one by one. Ooh, this feels very smooth too. So this one is light. And I will add, I am very, very fair today. I don't have any fake tan on, so that's barely showing up on my light skin tone. Next is medium. I'm actually gonna redo that swatch. Kind of on a weird part of my forearm right now. I feel like medium would be a really good transitional kind of crease shade for me. She did mention that a lot of these shades can be used on your eyes. And then last is the dark shade. That's really not that dark. It looks darker in the pan than it does swatched out. I am gonna go over that one more time. I'm interested to see how these shades are going to show up on the cheeks, especially on my fair skin tone, but just looking at these bronze and contour colors, clearly these are not universal shades. So when coming out with the face palette, I wish she would have done what she did with the Glam face palettes, where she made a light and a deeper version, because these are only going to work up to maybe a medium skin tone. Now let's swatch the 2 blush shades. First is the shade Pink. And this is a very, very pale, pale pink shade. Again, the formula does feel very creamy when I'm swatching it out. And then the last swatch is going to be this Coral Pink blush. Ooh, that's a very bright blush. Just looking at these shades, I think I'm gonna like these two mixed together because this looks very bright, this looks very pale for me, so I kind of want something in the middle. Here are all the shades of the Hyper Natural face palette swatched out. Now next I want to do a couple comparisons for you guys. Okay, so I just mentioned the Glam face palettes, and I do have the light version of this palette. Size-wise, the Hyper Natural face palette is just a little bit smaller than the Glam face palette, and they kind of have a similar packaging, but the Glam one is way more mirrored. And here are these two palettes side by side just to kind of show you a size comparison, especially with the face products as well. And I mean, color-wise, they're definitely not a dupe for each other at all. And then here is next to the I Need a Nude palette. These three neutral shades in the face palette kind of give me I Need a Nude vibes. I do want to swatch some of these brown shades next to each other. So again, this is Everyday from the face palette. And then I'm looking at Ella right here. I mean, formula-wise, they're definitely very different. Ooh, that shade is actually a lot closer than I expected it to be. I'm gonna go over that one more time. Shade-wise, they are pretty close, but Ella does have a little bit more of a reflectiveness to it. I also want to swatch Filigree. And I'm gonna swatch Statement next to that one. Statement is a little bit deeper, but again, Filigree just has more of a reflectiveness to it. And then let's swatch Travertine. I know I'm kind of doing this in a weird order here, but I want to swatch this shade because it does lean a little bit more taupe. And I'm going to swatch that to a Casual, which is the taupey shade in here. Okay, yeah, Casual is definitely way more taupe than Travertine. Next, I'm going to swatch Sheen. I can't remember, but I think this is one of the sparkly wet effect shadows. And then let's swatch Dreamy next to that one. Ooh. I feel like this Dreamy shade is packing a bit more of a punch, but they're definitely pretty similar. Would you agree? Just like shade-wise. Shade-wise, I definitely am seeing some similarities. And then I also wanted to pull out my Glam palette and see if there's any similar shades. And just looking at it, it does have a very similar vibe. So let's do some swatches. I'm gonna swatch out these 5 shadows on the left side of my arm, and then we'll see if we can find any comparable shades in Glam. I'm looking at this outer eyelid color that looks kind of close to Everyday, but it might be a little bit deeper. Yeah, definitely deeper. And then for Dreamy, I'm looking at this inner corner shade. Okay, very similar color, but again, this one is a sparkling wet effect shadow, so there's more sparkle to it, but shade-wise, those are pretty close. I'm thinking outer eyelid might be closer to Statement, like just looking at those two right there. So I think I'm gonna re-swatch this one next to Statement. Yeah, that's definitely a closer match than it was to Everyday. And now for the pink shade Soft, I'm looking at this center eyelid. So center eyelid isn't as bright and warm as Soft, but still a pink. And then for Casual, I'm kind of thinking of either these two outer eyelid shades, so I might as well just swatch both, right? So this is the first outer eyelid and the second outer eyelid. Ooh, I think that one's a little bit closer, so I'm gonna re-swatch Casual next to this outer eyelid. There we go. So based off these swatches, I think the shades in Glam are closer to the shades in this palette instead of I Need a Nude. But again, the formulas are very, very different. These shadows are meant to be applied with your finger and just kind of swiped on, good to go, where these shadows, you know, you got mattes, you got shimmers, you kind of build a complete eye look. So I hope those comparisons were helpful. And now let's do a face of makeup using this palette. Let's put this palette to the test and apply everything on my face. Feeling very blank right now. I just have on my foundation and concealer, and then I did lightly set my entire face. For shade reference, like I said, I'm very fair today. I have no fake tan on, and I'm wearing the Catrice Tinted Serum Foundation in the shade 10N. I want to start with the bronzer and contour and the blushes and then do eyeshadow last. So I need to find a brush that's going to fit into these small little shades for the bronzer and contour. Typically, this is the brush I like to use for my bronzer. I feel like it's going to mix the shades together, and I do want to try the shades individually. So I'm thinking I might try this smaller brush. I really want to see how this lightest shade shows up on my fair skin tone, so I'm going to pick it up on this brush, and I guess I'm going to start on my forehead here. And remember, the cheek products in here are a powder formula, which is why I did lightly set my face. Okay, I mean, this shade is showing up, so that's good. And this really is more of a contour shade because it is nice and cool toned. This is just not the brush that I prefer to apply this type of product with, but that's okay. I feel like that looks really nice, so I have just the lightest shade along my cheekbone and my forehead. Let's go ahead and do this cheekbone. Now I'm going to take this lightest shade on my little nose contour brush and just do a little bit of a nose contour. I'm actually really happy with how this shade is showing up on my skin tone, but again, if you're any deeper than me, this light shade is not going to be a contour shade for you. She did put a little pro tip right here. It says for deeper skin tones, use the lighter shade to highlight the inner corner and brow bone. I really want to try mixing all three shades together and just kind of see what kind of color I get, but I'm a little bit worried, but I feel like I just got to go for it, right? I'm going to take my usual bronzer brush. Let's do a little swirl there, pick up all the shades. I'm gonna place this on my forehead. Now I'm just picking up the first two shades. I'm kind of avoiding the deepest one, and I'm just gonna kind of bronze with that. I'm very happy with the tone of this shade. Like, it's not orangey at all, and it is applying and blending really smoothly on my face. Now let's try out these blush shades, and I'm going to take this little small angled brush and I'm going to dip into just the pale pink because I want to see what this looks like on its own. Picking up a little bit more. And I like to apply my blush like all over my cheek, so I go pretty heavy-handed with my blush. So there's what the light pink blush shade looks like. I actually really like how it looks on my skin. In the pan, it's not really a shade I would grab for, but I think it looks pretty good. Now let's take some of the deeper one. I'm just gonna do like one swipe of this because this looks pigmented. And I'm gonna place this shade more towards my temple. Oh yeah, this one's pigmented. This also is not my usual blush brush, but again, I wanted a smaller brush so I could try these shades individually. Again, I have a heavy hand, so this might be a lot to some people. Looking at my skin close up, this formula does look very, very smooth, so I'm very happy with the formula of these cheek products. For the other cheek, I'm just gonna swirl them together, which is probably how I would use this. This is my normal cheek blush brush. Definitely prefer my way of application on this cheek where I did the lighter blush first and then the deeper one because this is getting a little out of hand on this side. But I just had to try it that way, you know? Yeah, this cheek definitely looks better than this one. Okay, I'm taking my foundation brush and kind of tapping around the blush to get rid of some of this intense pigment. I think I kind of evened out the cheeks. They're not perfect, but this side looks very good to me. Now let's zoom in and try out these cream shadows. So when I did my base makeup, I didn't really prime my eyes, but I did pop a little bit of her concealer on my eyelid, and then I did set that with the translucent powder. I'm gonna start with this Everyday shade. And again, these shadows are meant to be used with your fingers. So let's go on the lid. I was kind of thinking if these shadows might have worked better on an unset eye base, so I kind of might take off what I have on this eye, but Let's keep moving forward with this one. I think it is grabbing a little funky kind of in the center of my lid. I'm going in with the third layer of this. Now I'm just gonna take a clean crease brush and see if I can soften out these edges. Maybe blend out the shadow a little bit. Okay, I just swirled my brush into that cream shadow. See if I can apply this in my crease. Okay, it's definitely applying, so that's good. I do want to add, just in general, I'm not really a big fan of cream eyeshadows, so when I saw this was a cream palette, I was a little bit hesitant at first. But this is actually blending out really well. I want to try this light contour shade on my crease brush. I want to see how this shade looks in my crease. I love putting a bronzer in my crease. I think it's so easy and just effortless to do. I mean, right now it just looks like I have a wash of brown all over my eyelid. Nothing really spectacular. Now I'm going to take Dreamy on my finger and I'm going to pop that in the center of my lid. And I'm pretty sure I am going to love this shadow because, again, I do really like her sparkling wet effect shadows. So pretty. Now for the lower lash line, I want to try a Statement on a pencil brush, and I'm going to run that across my lower lash line. See, the nice thing about these shadows though is that there is no fallout because it's more of a cream formula. Taking a little bit more of that light contour shade on my crease brush, and I'm just softening the lower lash line. And then I'm going to take a little bit more Statement on the outer part of my top lash line. Okay, so there's what the shadow looks like. It is a very, very simple look, but again, this palette is meant to be just kind of easy, everyday kind of palette. Now for this eye, I'm gonna wipe off the concealer and powder on my eyelid, prime my eye a different way and not set it. I really think these cream shadows will apply better that way and be like a little bit more, I don't know, just more exciting looking, I guess. So I'm gonna take my MAC Paint Pot in Painterly and apply that to my eyelid. And this time I'm not gonna set my eyelid with any powder. I'm gonna do the same eye look, so I'm gonna start with Everyday. So I really wanted to see if this shade in particular would be, I don't know, a little bit more reflective on an unset base, have a little bit more of a sheen to it. I think it looks the same as how it did on this eye, but kind of hard to tell because I already put kind of a topper shade on my eyelid. I'm gonna do the same thing with taking more of that shade on my crease brush and blending that throughout my crease. I am having a really easy time blending out this cream shadow, then taking the light contour shade on this brush and running that throughout my crease for a little bit more depth and something a little bit more matte. And then taking Dreamy on my finger and patting that on top. Honestly, this is my favorite shade so far, but I love a good sparkly shadow. It's like my favorite thing to wear on my eyelids right now. I definitely did a heavier application of the sparkly shade on this eye versus this eye. Taking a Statement on my pencil brush, putting that along the lower lash line. And then blending with my crease brush. Looking at both eyes, I feel like this one looks more brown to me. So I do feel like that Everyday shade that I started with did apply better on the unset eye base. I'm gonna add more Dreamy to this eye just to even things out since I put a lot on my right eye. do love this color. My eyes might be a little uneven today, but so are my cheeks. But again, the point of this video is just to try out the formula. I'm gonna go ahead and finish up this look with some mascara, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. I went ahead and finished up the eyes with some mascara, and I popped a nude liner in my waterline. I'm gonna link all the products I used today down below as usual. And here's the final close-up of the eyes all done. I gotta say, these cream shadows do feel very lightweight on my eyelids. Like, they're not too thick where they're going to kind of clump up and crease in your eye creases. All right, my entire face of makeup is done. Now let's talk about this palette. Let's start with the cheek products. So we have the bronzer contour and the blushes. First of all, I'm very impressed by this formula. And again, this is a new formula from her. So again, it's the Ultra Soft High-Tech Creamy Powder Formula with a natural matte finish. I feel like my cheeks look really, really nice. And I'm also wearing no highlighter today, but the foundation I'm wearing is a little bit glowy, so I think that glow is kind of peeking through these face products. And I was very impressed by the coolness of this contour shade, especially for my light skin tone. It can be a little tricky to find a cool tone contour shade that doesn't come off as too gray toned. I just think it's a great contour shade for lighter skin tones, and it did work really well in my crease as a little transition shade. Now for the Hyper Silk shadows, again, this was my very first time using, swatching, and feeling this formula, so my opinion could change. But I wasn't really as impressed with them as I was when I first swatched them. Like, you guys saw the swatches. They swatched beautifully. They were creamy. I had a little bit of a satin looking formula to them. I feel like on the eyes, it didn't really translate without that sparkling wet effect shadow on top. I do think that the eye with an unset eye base applied better, so I definitely recommend doing that if you do decide to pick this up. And in general, this palette is meant to be kind of a on-the-go, no makeup, effortless kind of look. And Natasha does say you just kind of apply one shadow, maybe top it off with this, and call it good. I really could see a lot more mature people really enjoying the formula of these more creamy shadows. I'd be interested to see my mom try this palette and hear her opinion on these creamy formulas. I think if you're someone that likes to apply your shadows with your finger, you like to just kind of swipe on a shadow and call it good, you probably really would like this. I would love to see Natasha make a deeper version of this palette for deeper skin tones, but also I really enjoyed the formula of these cheek products, so I would love to see those in like a single or like a bronzer, a bunch of blushes. That would be amazing to see from Natasha. I would love to know your thoughts on this hyper natural face palette and whether or not you're gonna pick it up. If you are gonna pick it up, remember I do have a code that works on her website. It's just ANGELABRIGHT to save some money. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.